on this edition of the program. The congressional vote that might send us into shutdown. What is happening with Justin Trudeau? Evan Scrimshaw joins us. And Musa Al-Gharbi breaks down who voted for who in the 2024 race. Specifically about race. We talk a lot about which race voted for who in that race. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for December 20th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you here. And friends, we've arrived at the true holiday season because it will be next week when both Christmas and Hanukkah arrive. And I would like to wish you guys all a warm festive tiding, but that unity, love, and brotherhood of man is not being felt in Washington, D.C. No, dear listeners and viewers, there is a fractious time. Angry representatives of the people's government that are sniping back and forth. Let's do a real quick kind of rundown. I was going to put this in the update in the middle of the episode. We're moving the update back. So let's play the update music. There we go. Okay. Here's what happens, and I'm a little informed on what could be happening next. So what you might have seen, what you might have read over the last few hours is that Thursday night, a vote was taken on a continuing resolution that was a stunning rebuke to Donald Trump, and now the government is going to shut down. The first part is almost certainly wrong, and the second part is possibly wrong. Let's start with what happened. There was a lot of consternation in the Republican conference of the House over the last 2 weeks about getting a continuing resolution to fund the government into when Republicans have a three-leg trifecta of government, the House, the Senate, and the White House. The problem is that there's not enough Republicans in the House that will vote on a party line, because you got some Republicans that just will not vote for a continuing resolution ever. Their whole thing is fiscal responsibility, and so they will say, absolutely not, we won't do it. Democrats will all bind together and vote for a continuing resolution all the time because they don't have a lot of fiscal hawks in their conference, right? So that meant that since there was not going to be a party line vote on a skinny continuing resolution, then Johnson had to go to the Democrats. Now, what I heard through the grapevine, little whispers in the walls, is that the Democrats, seizing on the fact that they got a chance to basically spend whatever they want. There was this time when this is when the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in South Florida was new. Me and a bunch of friends went there. I won for the first time ever $300 on a slot machine. I'm feeling great. So of course we go to the bar, and immediately I'm like, hey, to my friends, like, buy whatever you want. And immediately they both buy the most expensive thing on, the most expensive version of the drink that they wanted. That's what the Democrats did. The Democrats asked for a bunch of stuff. And they knew that Johnson was kind of in a rock and a hard place because he needed their vote. So the skinny continuing resolution then turns into this sprawling thing that's not an omnibus, but it looks like an omnibus. It's 1,500 pages. It's got all sorts of stuff in it. And Republicans are starting to get mad. And not even just the Republicans that always get mad. Republicans in leadership positions start getting mad. And they really don't like the way that it's handled. because they were held out of these negotiations, probably because Speaker Johnson knew they would be really mad about it. And meanwhile, lobbyists are like telling them what's in the bill because the lobbyists have talked to the Democrats, and the Democrats were the ones asking for it, so they know what's in the bill. So the lobbyists are telling Republicans who are supposed to be banding together what's in the bill. So this starts to fall apart when the big, big, big bill comes out. And this is where one of the things that's being repeated in the media all the time is that Donald Trump and Elon Musk killed this bill. They did not. That bill was dying itself. There was enough dissension in those ranks that it was going to fail. What Elon Musk and Trump did do is put the final nails in that coffin that was either going to take slower to die or faster to die. And Trump then sets the tone for the next thing, which is bump all that noise that the Democrats wanted. Let's do a clean CR with the few things that Republicans did want, which is disaster relief and some other stuff. And then Trump's like, well, why don't you, give one to Papa? He wants the debt ceiling gone for 2 years, not gone forever. Democrats want it gone forever. He wants it gone for 2 years. Why does he want it gone for 2 years? Because he doesn't want to deal with people yelling about the debt ceiling. He doesn't want to waste political capital on a thing that only hurts him. Because holding up the debt ceiling is something that Democrats rarely do, but sometimes they do. And you have to spend political capital to get over it, especially with a really thin majority. So Trump's like, you want to know what? Raise the debt ceiling for 2 years. Now, if there's some people in the House that won't vote for a continuing resolution, which essentially just says fund the budget at the same position for whatever time we're setting it for, in this case, it would be until March, then they definitely hate raising the debt ceiling. They hate doing it ever, at all, whatsoever. So the vote that happened Thursday night was not a vote that any Republican ever believed would pass. Speaker Johnson didn't think it would pass because it could not go through the Rules Committee because you got a bunch of these Freedom Caucus people, specifically Ralph Norman, Chip Roy, and Thomas Massey. Remember those names because they are like hardcore fiscal hawks, right? It was described to me that there is one of them that is really smart, one of them that is really stupid, and one of them that is a wild card. I will allow you, the listener, and congressional heads to fill in which one is which. But Chip Roy got shredded today by by Trump on Truth Social and then Twitter because he would not bring that vote. He was a no in the House on the Rules Committee, and so therefore it had to do this beyond the rules thing, which needs 2/3 of the House for it to become law. That was never happening. The reason why the vote was allowed to go forward was because the Republican leadership wanted to see who voted no and what they would need to vote yes. And so we are now where we are. I don't know when you're hearing this. I'm going to put it out immediately because I want this to be as fresh as possible. But here's what I would guess is going to happen. I would guess that now the bill will get smaller. It's already 150 pages. It's going to get smaller. I would suspect that you might see the debt ceiling thing get a little bit more flexible. Maybe there were some promises made. They flip one of the three on the Rules Committee, the smart one, the stupid one, or the crazy one. And then they party line vote this through with whatever, leeway they have. I think 2 Democrats voted for this version, so they probably vote for the other version. And, who knows how hard the Democrats would really whip against this because everybody does want to get home for Christmas. That would stave us from a government shutdown. The other side of the argument is this. The government does shut down and everybody goes home anyway. The argument for that, if you are okay with the government shutting down, is everyone's pretty much getting paid through the holidays anyway. So no one's really going to miss a paycheck if things are not open, or the government is quote unquote not open between now and kind of the beginning of January. But still, if the government does shut down, it does mean that there is, some political capital. It's going to have to get spent to make a deal. Eventually, you're just going to wind up back here anyway after the holidays, but the noise is going to be a lot louder, blah, 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 blah. The word I got from inside the Republican side of this is the vote was actually a more encouraging thing than they were expecting. That, yeah, there were 33 Republicans that voted against it, but they probably knew this wasn't going to pass, and so, whatever. If Trump and Vance start really whipping people, this will be a different story. But the possibility here is a very, very, very tiny continuing resolution. And then maybe some big capital C conservatives that say that they never vote for continuing resolutions voting for one. But we'll have to find that out a little bit later. All right. On the show, we have Musa Al-Gharbi coming up. He wrote one of the biggest books of the year, We Have Never Been Woke, which the title, please take it with a grain of salt. It is not a screed against quote-unquote wokeness. It is more about the overproduction of elites in society. It is a socio-economic academic kind of paper, but it's written in a way that you're really going to love it. Anyway, longtime friends of the show before that book hit know him as a guest of his program that's come on plenty of times. And the first time he ever came on was to talk about the demographics of the 2020 election and why it was a little bit different than the way that the narratives were being spun. And he has done so yet again, except it's the 2024 election that he would like to break down. And that will happen right after we talk to Evan Scrimshaw about why Justin Trudeau may or may not be the Prime Minister of Canada for much longer. Friends, as we round into Christmas, a chill has descended across the Great White North, and yet Justin Trudeau's seat remains toasty warm as he is embroiled in a controversy that needs to be explained to us by one of our friends that is actually going to be able to talk about the stuff that he writes the most about these days, and that is Canadian politics. Evan Scrimshaw, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, man. Always love being your Canadian correspondent.
Give me the super top level. Before we even get into why this is happening, what is happening right now with Justin Trudeau and how real is it?
The Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister resigned on Monday, lambasting the government for costly political gimmicks when we're staring down the barrel of a trade war. Thanks for that, by the way. And there is now a concerted effort of about a third of the Liberal caucus to replace Trudeau as leader of the party and install a new Liberal Prime Minister in hopes of saving their seats at the next election.
So the next election is next fall, right? That is
scheduled
October 25.
Scheduled for that, but theoretically it could happen sooner. It's a minority parliament, and if the opposition all want an election at the same time, they could force one.
They could force it. And so now Trudeau's parliament is the largest, but does not have a majority in the parliament. Explain to me parliamentary politics.
You need 170 seats for a majority. The Liberals have 160. There are 4 main parties, apologies to the Canadian Greens, and combined the 3 other opposition parties have the majority between them, but getting Conservatives, Social Democrats, and Quebec separatists to agree on anything is somehow harder than getting Mike Johnson to get 218 votes for a spending bill.
Gotcha. Okay. So the hope is for the Liberal Party is that Trudeau is becoming untenable, and that they can either replace him now and hope to stave things off a little bit, maybe leg it out to October and show the new shining face of what Liberal leadership would be, or they can face almost certain doom.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau is losing on average by 22 points, which is, quite bad. The Liberals will be reduced from that 160 seats they wanted the last election to about 40, depending on the poll.
That's a tumble. That's a serious tumble.
Yeah, they would be in third. They would fall behind a political party that literally only runs candidates in one province, the Bloc Québécois.
Yeah.
So it's really bad. And there has been a chorus of people, myself included. There has been the government has now lost 3 special elections special elections in seats that they held this year. They just lost one on Monday with a 53-point swing against them.
Not great,
so
Bob.
You now finally have caucus, you finally have the members listening to people like me who have been saying this is untenable for months, and finally trying to force him out of, they're going to claim some amount of patriotism. It's not about patriotism. It's about the fact that all of them are about to lose their seats if Justin Trudeau stays as leader.
Okay, so let's now bring this into the stuff that has happened recently that has brought this to the fore, and that is Donald Trump posting on Truth Social. Do I have this correct, that this begins with Donald Trump's late night, I'm going to put tariffs on Canada and Mexico unless they do what I want, and then it was the way that Trudeau responded to that brought all this to a head?
Not exactly. In June, the Liberals lost a special election in Toronto. The Liberals were like, we need to do something, so maybe we'll get former Bank of Canada and Bank of England Governor Mark Carney to be our new finance minister. Mark Carney was like, no, I'm not going to join a party that's 20 points down. I'm not doing this. The Liberals were like, fine, we'll keep the incumbent. Donald Trump happens. He wins. He tweets the 25% tariff threat. The finance minister, who already knows that the PM tried to replace her, obviously, if I know it, she knows it.
Okay.
So she says, what are you doing? Why are you doing these costly political gimmicks? The prime minister's office, that's sort of equivalent to the White House in this context, was like, yeah, but we're going to try and buy some votes by taking the sales tax off beer and soda before the election, or before Christmas, for 2 months for reasons. It costs a few $1 billion that we don't really have. The prime minister then tells the finance minister that we're going to replace you, so you can either take this essentially fake job, or but you're getting shuffled out. And that comes out Friday. We had a mini budget. We have the fall mini budget on Monday. She was expected to deliver the mini budget before being fired the next morning. And she was like, actually, you know what? I'm going to call you out. I'm going to write a resignation letter calling you an idiot, essentially.
Yeah.
And now we're here.
Okay, so this is even sillier than I thought. Like, he is floundering. I mean, I knew he was up against it. But he is floundering and looked at as very, very unserious in terms of where the economics of the country are anyway, and he mismanaged this woman's position in the government, and so she quits, and now that hurts because it's somebody who is very close to Trudeau and has seen his leadership for years, presumably, right?
And was an original Trudeau acolyte. Because the thing about Justin Trudeau, he's not very bright. Everybody knows he's not very bright. He was known before he went into politics as the stupid one of former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's kids. But unfortunately, the one that everybody thought was the intellectual heir, and the one that was going to be the politician, died in a skiing or snowboarding accident in the 90s. So Justin had to take it over. And
Yeah.
everybody knows he's an idiot. Turns out he still is an idiot. He hasn't learned anything
Yeah.
in the last 10 years. He's surrounded by idiots. And the only smart person running the finance department just said no. And the other person, the second smartest person on economics in the government, said, actually, I don't want to do the finance job. I don't want to take this mess from you. So it went to his old goddamn buddy, who's an idiot and has no finance background. And we're 30 days away from a tariff war.
Okay. So let's walk this forward a little bit. What are the levers that can be pulled? From my understanding of this, you have the example that you just said in terms of no confidence, but that would involve all of the disparate parties agreeing that Justin Trudeau is an idiot, and more specifically that those parties would benefit by pulling the pin right now. And then you have the Liberal Party convincing Trudeau to resign, right?
Yeah. So Trudeau is doing a cabinet shuffle. As people are listening to this, it's either happening or just about to happen or just happened. But what he's going to try, his hope is that he's going to try and put this cabinet together, try and survive through the holidays, and hope magically that when everybody shows back up to work on January 6th, everyone's just forgotten that they're going to lose their seats. The cabinet and the caucus are plotting mechanisms to try and get a majority of the caucus to sign a letter putting their names forward saying, we don't have confidence in you, as a way of forcing him out. Okay. And I can report, I mean, I've written it on my site, but there are cabinet ministers who are considering resignations if Trudeau does not
resign.
If Trudeau doesn't make this easy, then they will embarrass the bleep out of him in early January.
So yeah, nobody wants to do a coup over Christmas dinner. So I think he'll probably survive the holiday. Like he'll survive the next few weeks. But your prediction is that this gets really ugly really fast in January unless he makes a move.
There's basically no historical precedent in Canada or anywhere else that like once it reaches a certain Rubicon that a leader stays on. Whenever this has happened, the Australians cooing themselves every time, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Joe Biden earlier this year, you know, I tweeted it at the time about Biden, right? But it's the coach that is like very clearly about to be fired.
Yeah.
We just saw it with Manchester United in England, right? Like the Bears with Eberflus, right? Like it's happening. It's just a matter of when.
You've lost the locker room per se, to use the sports metaphor.
Yes.
And the hammer that would drop would be, you know, much in the same way where Biden, the drip was people with higher and higher profiles saying that he should resign, right? That was the embarrassment that was eventually kind of reaching higher and higher and higher, and Biden cried uncle before it could hit Pelosi or Clyburn or somebody that would like really, really hurt him. That would be absolutely untenable. In this situation, you already had one cabinet minister resign. If you had two or three, now the question is, you know, how on earth do you go forward?
Right, and it's the other thing is that like literally he cannot get the people he wants to do the cabinet jobs, which is a telltale sign in a parliamentary system that you're not going to be able to keep this together, because if the lure of being the finance minister, if that isn't enough for people, like you're done. You have no authority left. You have no power left, and it's just a matter of when you realize that fact.
So what do you think happens first? He steps down, or they actually, you know, it's a call for no confidence?
I think so. My birthday is Inauguration Day, which is a fun fact. Randomly, I was born 5 hours into Bill Clinton's second term. I think by U.S. Inauguration Day and my birthday, I think Trudeau will have announced that he will not lead the Liberal Party into the next election, and there will be a like quick and dirty 6-8 week Liberal leadership race, and Trudeau basically just begs Trump not to completely destroy our economy in the meantime.
You know, and yeah, if we can Well, hold on. I'm trying to find here whether or not there's a poly market on Trudeau.
I believe there was on whether he would make it to the end of this year, but that never really made any sense because if he's gonna resign, he's like, if he's gonna choose to resign over the holidays, he'll announce it. He'll announce it January 6th.
Trudeau out before April is the market,
Oh, they've changed it. Okay.
and it's at 67.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The other reason why.
So you're saying that this would be, at least when we are recording this, it's at 67. That's a good bet for April. If you think he's going to be out by January.
Yeah, because the thing is, he can't stay on as leader indefinitely because the other thing is that the leader of the Social Democratic Party, the New Democrats in Canada, he gets his parliamentary pension in February. So he has been carefully stalling an election until he became pension eligible. He claims that's not why, but it is 1,000% why, and everybody knows it. And so theoretically, even if he tries to cling on, there's just going to be a March 19th election or whatever, and he's going to lose it then.
Gotcha.
So yeah, no, he's gone. He can't survive this. There's no way. I personally will not allow it to happen. I will commit a Jan 6th to stop it.
Well, I'll tell you what. Then they're selling dollars for 66 cents on Poly Market. So that's good news for people who like money. All right, let's flip on over to the American side of this. How much of the Trump cage rattling posting has brought this? I mean, obviously you laid out all the reasons that are domestic that probably have far more to do with this, but how seriously is Canada taking the Truth Social posts, and is there possibly a thought from Trump's side that he's if the Liberals are out, it's better for them to be out earlier, especially if it's going to be conservative leadership for the prime minister, it's somebody that probably work better with Trump.
So everyone's freaked. Like we're all completely bleeping ourselves because we have allowed our relationship with you guys to just like stop good economic policy for about 40 years.
Yeah.
But the thing that is this government just announced $1 billion package for more border security. You've got premiers, ramping up, quasi unconstitutional, border stops to try and get fentanyl. Like, I think if Trump made the threat because he wants to claim a victory, I think the Canadian government will give him something that he can claim as a victory.
Which is what I assume this is, because that's what it always is.
Right. And so I think
it's like whenever Donald Trump makes threats like this, in my opinion, this is just my read of it. It's him kicking the machine to see if a coin's going to fall out, because you're an idiot if you don't kick the machine. Like, I think his point of view is that every 6 months he should threaten economic ruin for other countries unless they give him a treat. And then he wants to see what treat falls out.
Yeah, of course. And the thing is, if I were the Americans and I could get away with it, I probably would do it. Just because why the hell not?
Yeah.
I think this is going to, I think it's going to be fine. Especially because the thing that Trump really cares about is illegal immigration and fentanyl, and those are much more significantly southern border problems than northern border problems. And two,
Yeah.
There will be allies in the Republican administration, right? There are Doug Burgum is in his cabinet, right? Well, Burgum's a Canadian border state governor who has great relations with basically all of the premiers up here. Like, there are enough pro-Canada, at least Stefanik, I think she literally reps a border district, or at least has in the past. I don't remember the current New York lines, but I think Stefanik, they might posture, but at the end of the day, they know that the places that they come from would be absolutely screwed by retaliatory tariffs because, by the way, we will cut off Michigan and upstate New York from Canadian energy, which is how they keep the lights on. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that the worldview of Trump economically when it comes to tariffs is we are the 800-pound gorilla. We should act like it. And that means that we should be constantly renegotiating all of our deals to make sure that we have the best version of that deal for America. Like that is his thing. And the way that he sees the thing that gets the people's attention the most, that gets him the phone call to Mar-a-Lago, or in Trudeau's case, the flight down to Palm Beach the fastest, is to say 25% tariff across the board and then just wait for people to call him.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, Canada is the country that when the Americans say how high, or say jump, we say how high. And I mean, I would suspect that whoever delivers the next Canadian budget, I mean, the Conservatives just agreed to the government's plan for, rapidly increasing defense spending to 2%, which is another, Trump bugaboo about Canada. Like, he's gotten results for the things that he cares about. And again, I would do the exact same thing if I were negotiating with a country that has left itself this vulnerable.
Yeah. All right. You said you had an American topic.
So Elon Musk is very obviously trying to be the shadow president of the United States. He apparently can just get the House Republicans to do whatever they want.
Well, yeah, it's also like calling somebody strong for pushing over a drunk. Like it is not the highest hurdle to clear to collapse an extraordinarily fragile bill where the speaker has already pissed off ranking members of his own party.
I don't disagree with that. Obviously, my contempt for the SGP is well known on this podcast. But this conversation came up this morning, and I want your quick take on it. Okay, if a House Republican were to put a bill on the floor to amend the Constitution to remove the natural-born citizen clause from the presidency requirements of the U.S. Constitution, how would it pass, and would it get the 290 it needs? Because I kind of sneaky think that if somebody did it and Elon pushed for it, I kind of think that might happen, because how could Democrats vote against it?
Well, I wouldn't put anything past this kind of topsy-turvy world right now, because I do think that what is fascinating about our moment at this point is that we are at the beginning of trying to figure out exactly where the alliances are going to be. And I do think that we have probably reached peak partisanship, specifically with Donald Trump, who is going to be a lame duck. You already see some Democratic voices that are like, hey, we'll work with him on X, Y, and Z. You've seen some bipartisan flirting with like the Doge stuff. So I do think you probably could do it, but also you shouldn't bet against Nancy Pelosi. You shouldn't bet against anybody for whom understands that wielding an explicitly partisan wedge is something that's very, very effective. So if they were to put Elon can be president now bill on the floor, I think it would be DOA, even from the Republican side.
Really? You don't think he has enough power in the caucus to scare them with the threat of a primary?
You have as much power as... Look, the Republican primary threat, I don't know... I mean, in the House, I guess you would take it seriously.
House, it would be DOA in the Senate. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, the primary threat in the House is, you face the like Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger fate, where it's like, but then again, they were also persona non grata on like Fox News, and not just like Elon's going to dump $3 million in your district, right? But the problem is it also gets into like, then it's like, all right, well, is that America first? I don't know. I mean, if Trump was like I've known many great foreigners, they're just as American as anyone else, and they deserve to be president just like me. Like maybe, but it would take a lot of lift. And I think for Elon right now, he kind of has realized that like he doesn't have to constantly have his hands on the ball. he can just swipe at it every once in a while when he kind of sees where the winds are blowing on Twitter anyway. And that's the valuable thing. So it's like, could it be done? Yes. And it is remarkable that there is a possibility that it could be done. I would bet against it.
I thought it came up, you know, in all of this and him being the quote unquote shadow president. And it's a fascinating concept because I'm like, it's very obvious that is why Musk has done what he has done in the last thing. The other variable, of course, is Rupert Murdoch is 93. He just lost that court case in Nevada, which means that it's, you know, theoretically possible that Fox News could fall to his climate change loving, you know, apologetically liberal kid. Does Rupert just sell Fox News and guarantee that it stays in right-wing hands? Could Elon Musk be a buyer for that?
Question is, who wants that? You know, it's like right now, Fox is celebrating because it seems to have won the cable wars, as CNN and MSNBC's viewership have just, you know, vanished into the ether, where now it's only pets that televisions have been left on for. But what have you really won, right? Like the cable bundle is dying. Over-the-top live stuff is not there. I mean, I guess theoretically Fox would be really, really valuable as a live platform wherever live eventually lives. It could be something to sell to one of the streaming players. Like, could Fox News sell to Netflix, like as a streaming tile that you could watch?
Yeah,
you know, who knows?
The problem with Fox going direct to consumer is either through Fox or in a tile on Netflix or whatever. Like, Fox is like an incredibly boomer friendly demographic, and I don't know that Fox's audience would go to a D2C future in the way that like a younger audience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking. I'm just kind of thinking of like, well, where, if you bought Fox, aside from just being able to say that I own Fox News, right? I'm the new Rupert Murdoch. Where is the value of it as the cable bundle continues to die, based on what you would buy it for? Because I don't imagine that Rupert Murdoch would sell it for anything less than a king's ransom.
Right. But the reason I think Murdoch is going to sell it is that he figured out that he needed to sell most of the Fox Entertainment stuff 2 years before he got, I think, $70 billion for the Fox properties to Disney.
Yeah.
If he sold that 2.5 years later, he probably gets 30. And I wonder if he might do the same thing and try and bid up the Koch brothers, Elon, and I don't know if the Adelsons have, like, the Adelson back group or something, and piece it together, because it would be consistent with.
I think we might have passed the point of no return on it, though. To be totally honest,
maybe.
like run it. You know, part of the reason why I moved this platform to Substack, I've said this before, was like when I was at the DNC and the RNC, and I was up in the C-SPAN booth, so I'm next to all of the networks, right? And I'm like just leaning my head out like a meerkat, and I'm looking down at all the networks, and I'm like, how many of these are going to be here in 4 years the next time? And I'm like, I would not be shocked if maybe they're not gone, but it's a way smaller crew, that maybe CNN doesn't have 4 suites, they got 2, that maybe MSNBC has 1. Maybe these networks might have to look radically different. Now, I think that there's an argument that you could be made that like these are still really valuable. The problem is that the budgets are just insane and they don't need prestige New York City accommodations. You can, kind of do something closer to the ESPN model of like find 2 or 3 talent that you ride into the ground, find 2 or 3 podcasts that you use to just eat time in the center of the day. And then other than that, just scrimp and save wherever you can. Like that might be the future of those. And if that's the case, like who wants to buy that? Like you'd have to be in the business of liking stripping stuff down.
I think CNN probably would actually have the most value because it has the biggest international reach and it has the closest. It is the closest thing to like a sort of malleable brand that can be sort of
Yes.
chopped and changed as you need. And I actually think CNN would actually be what would work great on a tile on Netflix.
I said this forever ago, especially when Zaslav bought Warner.
Well, that's
I
the
was
other
like-
thing. Zaslav needs money, so.
Yeah, I was like, CNN's going to get sold. And you want to know where I thought it was going to go? Apple. Because CNN is a brand that Apple could say, Jim Acosta, hit the bricks. We are straight news. Like, just, we're going to be American BBC, and that is what you're going to get. And it's like, we're Apple. We don't give a rat's ass whether or not you are anybody is watching you, just in the same way they don't care about whether anyone's watching their television. They care that you have an Apple device when the live thing happens that you need to see coverage of, and we're just going to put straight news coverage on your phone. Like, I think Apple's brand could do it.
They're too scared. They're too scared of anything critical about China. That's their problem. That's why Jon Stewart got fired.
Yeah. I mean, also see the aforementioned nobody was watching, but like,
Okay, but that doesn't seem to be a problem when they greenlight TV shows with like $150 million budgets. And
it's true. That's true. That didn't stop Schmigadoon season 2. So
Yeah, it didn't stop Masters of the Air or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I guess the China thing is one thing, but also it's like, how many times does CNN remove the endless talking heads, right? Because to me, we did this topic on the We're Not Wrong show, the panel show that I do, and we were like each trying to talk about what we would do with CNN or MSNBC, because with the idea that either might be sold. And my thing was, number one, you do like a live PD or like an NFL red zone thing in the middle of the day. That's just literally like the live scrambles of people in Congress. Like, so that's all you're doing. It's just, and half the time you're just live to that camera. You're trying to fill time. You have 2 or 3 different people out there and you're trying to throw to different things, blah, blah, blah. Right. So it's like something that makes that feel alive. And then at night you take whatever that weird Thunderdome show that they have where all the people are looking at each other. So it's like the first time that they've done like a Crossfire-esque kind of set in a while. And you just amp that up to 11. You let 2 conservatives on at the same time and you just let them scream at each other. Just go full Jerry Springer.
God, now I'm just reminded of how bad the Crossfire revival from the early 2010s was. Oh God.
Who do they have on there?
No, Paul Begala was on the original Crossfire, right?
No, the original, the OG Crossfire personalities were like bangers, right? It was Carville, Begala, Carlson.
Yeah, Tucker, obviously, because there's the famous clip of Jon Stewart skewering Carlson with the bow tie.
But those 3, it's like, hell, I mean, I don't know. I'd put Carville and Carlson on a show against each other today. I think that'd be money.
God. Why do I think Newt Gingrich was involved in the... No.
He might have been.
Yeah, it was Newt, S.E. Cupp, Stephanie Cutter, and Van Jones. Oh my God, that show was so bad.
Oh, geez. Yeah, no, that stinks.
But honestly, more, this is like my like most terrible liberal, like anti-liberal opinion. Scott Jennings is incredible TV. Every time he speaks,
he's awesome.
TV. He's the worst politically, ideologically. Great TV.
Yeah.
He understands the point of a CNN panel. He understands what he is there to do.
Everybody freaked out when Gudersky told like Mehdi Hasan, oh, your beeper's going off or whatever. And it's like everybody freaked out like it was the worst thing on earth. And it's like, look, is it off color? Is it not nice to say? Yeah, to both. Guess what television is? It's like stuff that makes you want to turn your head. Like that was good television, in my opinion.
That was the most any CNN clip has gone has hit
gone viral.
Yeah,
and also it's like
the most in years.
He didn't say it to a baby. He said it to Mehdi Hasan, who said a lot of things to a lot of people. He's a big boy. He can, like you didn't need to treat it like it was 9/11.
That was actually a moment where I was like, oh, wow, there's still like a little bit of this ability of CNN to make news on it.
Yeah, but then they immediately like, oh no, we'll release 4 apologies and we've banned him from the building, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, cool. You accidentally had good television happen and you immediately snuffed it out.
How did we even get here? Oh, yeah, that's out. Yeah.
Elon, yeah. Would Elon buy Fox News? I don't know. I don't think so. What was the thing that he was thinking? Oh, he was joking about buying MSNBC
because he didn't actually understand what Comcast did. That was the thing that was annoying me about all the articles about this. It was like MSNBC is not for sale. It will not be for sale. That's not what they did. They just sent it to a spinco. Like,
well,
no.
I mean, they put it on an ice flow. They put it on an ice flow
because
it is scheduled to die.
MSNBC is the only thing that forces Charter to pay the carriage fee.
Yes.
That and CNBC. Yeah. It's the only 2 reasons they're going to pay for USA and all the other terrible, now ex-Comcast cable channels.
Well, no, USA gets higher ratings. I think USA drives that.
USA gets ratings? People watch USA?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Then again, America seems to love food, so I don't know what y'all are doing down there.
Yeah, no, I mean USA, at least for I don't know, I'd have to check, but as I was aware, like the 2 of the biggest cable channels that weren't news and that weren't sports were USA and TNT. Now, again, it's kind of a tallest short person competition.
Okay, but how much of TNT's ratings are basketball though? Let's be real.
I mean, they know drama. They know drama. We do know that. All right. Scram, where can people find you?
Scrimshaw.substack.com. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky at eScrimshaw, but I'm mostly still on Twitter because it's just better. I'm sorry, it is. I'll have, I do a weekly NFL show with my buddy at my YouTube channel. I'm going to be expanding into hockey and some other sports stuff in the winter. That's in the new year. That's what I was looking for. And I'll probably be doing some more. I'll probably have an announcement about the future of my sports writing in the future. And I will. I've written one thing about U.S. politics since like the election, condemning.
We got plenty of stuff.
Condemning Hunter Biden, the pardon of Hunter Biden, and everybody was everyone was completely sane about that, and I didn't get called a fascist at all. Not because everyone's super cool about that. But yeah, I'll definitely be writing about Trump. I'm gonna recommit to the U.S. in the new era. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about the Hunter Biden part. It's just ridiculous.
Insane.
Insane.
Thanks for having me on, buddy.
All right, Doug. Peace out. All right, we already did the update, right? We did the update. We did the big update with what's happening in Congress, so we're not going to do a bunch of stories here, but I do always want to let you guys know that TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you can support this show. A bunch of you have taken advantage of the gift subscriptions. I will do a video for the people that you are getting a gift subscription to, and we're going to make it special. I'm right here. I'm on the set. I'm going to record them when I've been recording them as I do the shows. It's a good time. Thank you very much to everybody that's done it. This is our last episode before Christmas, so get them in. Get them in. TakePoliticsSeriously.com for $3 a week. Sometimes less than $3 a week, to be honest with you. you get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. No matter what, rain or shine. We're skipping an episode, spoiler alert, we're skipping an episode on the free feed next week because it's Christmas. We ain't skipping any of the bonus episodes, friends. Hell no. And then, of course, you get over 150 episodes for less than $100 if you buy it annually. It's a good deal. It's a good deal. $99 for the year, for the whole year. Anyway, head on over there, takepoliticsseriously.com. And now, Musa Al-Gharbi. It is my honor to have back on the show Musa Al-Gharbi. We Have Never Been Woke is the book. And I gotta say, podcast guest of the year for my feed. Musa, you have been all over the place promoting this book. It seems like it has been a gigantic success. I am still in the beginnings of it, but I can very much see why. It is absolutely jam-packed on an issue that has powered at least certain sectors of the media for the past several years. It feels like you have not only written, but it has been being discussed as kind of an authoritative work on this moment in cultural history. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I've been really honored and surprised and humbled by the warm reception the book has received. Both me and the publisher were girding up for nonsense when the book came out, but people, it seems like, have really been able to read it and process it in the spirit in which it was intended, and that's been great and very gratifying.
And look, we had you on when you came out where you talked about a little bit more of the premise to it, but this is very much an academic, and what I find so refreshing about it now reading it is a truly, balls and strikes understanding of systems and motivations for why you have these performative elements of society and what they mean. It's great. And I wonder, let me ask you this. There's even a moment at the beginning of the book where you seem to mention like, well, some of these things are kind of falling out of favor. So this is a good moment for the next time that it pops up. But I kind of feel like the further I get into the book, you couldn't have written this version of it if you had done it in the heat of it. Like this, the reason why it feels authoritative is because it does feel like that especially with Trump winning, this was kind of the end of the road for this version of whatever was happening over the last 8 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I sold the book in 2021, and we hope to get it turned around by mid 2021. And I'm kind of glad that it didn't work out that way in retrospect, because for this very reason. And in general, when I write, I try to write a little off cycle. So I'm not the kind. I write a lot for the public media, but I'm not the kind of guy who usually, something happens and I'm with a hot take the next morning. I usually kind of wait to see what other people have said, because the initial takes on things are often bad. Information is still coming in. People are still trying to, often initial takes turn to be wrong when new information comes out. So I like to just, for most things, just take a minute and kind of see what other people have said, see how the facts develop, and then that allows me to talk about issues then in a way that that's more oriented towards posterity, and that allows me to say things that other people haven't said but need to be said, and so on, to kind of find places of opportunity where I can make a contribution to the discussion that's like genuinely novel and valuable. And so the book ended up having a similar kind of timeline like that. Even when I tried to be more timely, it just didn't work out. And so, but that's probably to the benefit of the work, as you said.
I think it 100% is, and for anybody who is really on any side of the issue, and that's the thing is that any conversation about social issues and systemic whatever any version of problems with the system are off, especially over the last 8 years, have been so oppositional. The concept of let's just actually X-ray the skeleton. Let's just look at where this is, who's saying what, and let's try to back it up with as much data as possible. Just a phenomenal work, and I would encourage anybody who has not read it, please do not be put off by the fact that this is described in any way as an academic text. It certainly is, but it is not unapproachable. It is very, very much. If you follow any of society, and trust me, it has followed you. You will appreciate it. You will enjoy it. So go get the book.
Thank you. 5% commission on.
Boom. But before you had the book deal, before you were on every podcast, we first had you on this podcast because I appreciated some of the work that you were doing in terms of demographics for the 2020 election. And I was very appreciative of the work that you put in, specifically in kind of dispelling some of the narratives that were very comforting, especially in light of a Biden win, that it was, black women in Atlanta that solely, pushed Joe Biden over the top. In reality, it was the people that would be comforted by the idea that black women in Atlanta had pushed it over the top that wound up pushing Joe Biden over the top. You've had some time to look at this election, the 2024 election. What are your top lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the top lines is that a lot of the trends that we saw in 2020 continued into 2024. So the Democratic Party saw continued losses with African Americans and Hispanics. The Democratic Party did worse with women than in previous cycles. In fact, Kamala Harris got the smallest vote share of the female vote of any Democratic nominee of the past decades, other than the only person who did worse was John Kerry in 2004, who was incidentally the first person I ever cast a vote for.
I read that in the book. you admitted Kerry stan, Musa Al-Gharbi.
So along lines of race, Democrats have continued to see losses with minorities. Along lines of gender, they did really poorly with women, and they got about the same share of men that they typically get. They didn't do poorly with men, but they did do really poorly with women relative to previous cycles. In terms of socioeconomic status and things like this, we saw a pattern where relatively affluent people and also even rich people shifted significantly towards the Democratic Party over the last 4 years, even as less affluent, less educated, and so on people shifted towards the GOP. So I published a piece on my Substack pulling together a lot of data called something like a graveyard of bad election narratives.
Yes.
And so one of the striking things about that piece is I realized after I wrote it that I had written this exact same article, producing the exact same charts, showing the exact same trend lines, 2 other times now, once after the 2016 election and then once after 2020. You can see a lot of these trend lines, Democrat attrition with working class and less affluent and less educated people, with racial and ethnic minorities, with religious people. They've persisted across every midterm and every general election cycle since 2010, even as the party has consistently been gaining more and more with whites, with relatively affluent people, with highly educated people, with people who live in cities and things like this. And so you can see that there's this growing schism between basically people who work in knowledge economy fields and live in knowledge economy communities and so on, and basically everyone else in society. Yes. I think that's actually kind of the mode of analysis that helps understand all of the other divisions. So like things like the urban-rural divide, the gender divide, the diploma divide, the racial de-alignment. I think you can explain all of those things at once by focusing on this growing political divide between knowledge economy professionals and their preferred political party, the Democrats, versus basically large swaths of the rest of the public.
And that's where I think a lot of the vertigo has come in, specifically in terms of how we understand our world. Because if the knowledge economy is essentially a captured industry for the Democrats, then you're always just going to get a Democratic hued version of reality. You know, something that just came up as we were getting ready to do this show. I was, scrolling on Twitter, and there was a second choice poll. So people that voted for third party, who were their second choice, which is essentially which of the two mainstream candidates would they have voted for had they not voted for a third party candidate. Jill Stein, RFK Jr., and Chase Oliver. They're all Trump. The closest is Chase Oliver, the libertarian candidate, but it's still like a 10-point advantage in Trump's direction. It's not overwhelming, but it brought something up in my mind, which is by far the most well-known publication that speaks explicitly to libertarian thought is Reason Magazine, based in Washington, D.C. I remember reading their who am I voting for stuff, and I think there was one person who said that they were going to vote for Trump. Everybody else was Chase Oliver or Kamala Harris because they believed that this was that important. And it's fascinating, and I think it's going to really shape our media going forward to understand and rationalize, like, okay, well, if everybody who went to college and everybody who went to J school and everybody who works in New York or DC or LA or San Francisco are all in one direction, how do you accurately tell the tale of politics if you are in that system? It seems untenable after this election in a way that it didn't even seem that untenable between 2016 and 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, but until 2016, I didn't really do anything about politics per se. And the only reason I got interested in analyzing presidential elections and things like this is because I noticed in 2016 that there was this epistemological bubble where almost all of us seemed to be in agreement, not only that Trump was marginally more likely to lose than Hillary Clinton or something, but that it was literally impossible for him to win. There were all these things in the primaries, like Trump will never win the Republican nomination. If he wins the Republican nomination, I'll eat the paper this column is printed on. And then after Trump won the nomination, there were like 2 seconds were like, oh, I feel like we should learn something from this. But then immediately after Hillary Clinton secured her when she beat Bernie Sanders, then they were back to, it's going to be a landslide. The Republicans are destroyed for a generation, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And so the fact that everyone...
Which, by the way, wasn't just the Democrats. That was, when I was covering the Republican primary, or the Republican convention, that was the prevailing thought amongst the Republicans in that convention.
Nate Silver offered Trump a 30% chance of winning. And people were going to town on him like, are you insane? 30%? What are you, a Trump supporter? 30%. That's crazy, right? Like, and this is because everyone else was putting it at like 5%, 10%, 2%, 1%. And so the fact that the expert consensus was so unanimous and so extreme was part of what led me to ask the question, well, is there reason to maybe think that, like, basically everyone is wrong? So I started to, in military communities and from a military family, there's this practice called red teaming where because lives are on the line based on whether or not a plan is accurate, what they do is they have one team draw up a plan, they have another team, a red team, who had no role in drawing up that plan, approach it as a hostile actor. Yeah, they say, this is the dumbest plan I've ever seen. If you do this, you're all going to die. So the idea is you assume the opposite of what you want to be true, and then you look for evidence for that. So I red teamed the 2016 election, and I found there was tons of reasons to think that actually Trump would probably win. And I spent most of that cycle in my public writing explicitly trying to encourage people to take Trump's prospects more seriously and so on, mostly screaming into a vacuum. And then after the election, I was really disturbed because basically nothing was learned. Because rather than this is like one of the biggest expert prediction failures in modern history, where the experts were unanimous, extreme, and wrong. And rather than learning anything from this and thinking about how did we do things wrong, where did we go awry? What's wrong with the Democratic Party and its platform and so on? Most of the scholars and journalists were focused on pathologizing the voters, on saying the reason why the Democrats didn't win is because those people are racist and sexist and misogynist and so on and so forth. And so I published pieces showing that, problematizing that narrative, showing that the reason Trump won actually was because of shifts among non-whites, shifts among women, shifts among religious people and less affluent people. It wasn't the privileged, cisgendered, heterosexual, white, whatever, who were trying to defend their privilege and supported Trump, and that's why he won. The opposite is true.
Yeah.
And the opposite has been growing even more true in every single midterm and general election over the last 10 years, but people have been unable to process it for the very reason you mentioned, that because of all of us are on the blue line of charts, when we want to understand anything that we think of as bad, our primary impulse is to not ask, well, why are we so weird? What are we doing wrong? What's wrong with us? But rather to look at the red line people and chalk up anything we think of as bad to deficits and pathologies among the red line people. So why is there polarization in America? Well, we can produce charts. Our own charts show that it's clearly the blue line that shifted more than the red line. But when we analyze those charts, we can look at those charts that we ourselves produced that show that the blue line is driving polarization and still write essays that go, well, why is there polarization? Because Republicans went crazy.
Yes.
And we can't see our own data sometimes. And so you get these, I wrote this journal article called Race in the Race for the White House on Social Research in the Age of Trump. And what I show in this study is that there's all of these glaring errors that journalists and scholars, they keep publishing these studies where their charts and data clearly show one thing. They literally can't process that information. And so they end up arguing the opposite of what their own data and charts show.
Yeah.
And this is a thing that happens over and over and over again. Quick example. Right before the election, the senior political analyst for NBC News shared a chart that said, why is Trump making gains with Latinos? It's because of shifts among men and young people. And he included a chart that showed changes from 2020 to 2024. Okay, problem with this narrative is that his own data showed that women actually shifted more towards the Republican Party than men, that Hispanic and Latino people across gender lines were both shifting towards the Republican Party. And in fact, again, women shifted more than men. Hispanic and Latino women shifted more than Hispanic and Latino men towards the GOP over this same period. So I noted in a comment, myself and Matt Iglesias noted in a comment that his own chart showed that his narrative was clearly wrong, that women shifted more towards the GOP than men. And this was eventually community noted. But this is an example of but before Matt and I started going, hey guy, you should maybe just look at your own chart again. Before that, the tweet had already enjoyed really wide circulation. So this is a person who, the chart was produced by a team of sophisticated data analysts who looked at this thing and couldn't see the clear trend line. And then this guy, who's the senior political analyst from NBC News, looked at this data and couldn't see his own trend lines, and he shared it out. And then a whole bunch of people retweeted it and liked it and circulated it, just assuming that the senior president for that the senior editor, political editor for NBC News wouldn't be sharing a chart showing that Latinos were shifting because of men if women were actually shifting more. That doesn't even occur to a lot of people as a possibility. So they just kept sharing this chart, assuming that it's men who are changing and telling their stories about toxic masculinity and whatever. And so this is a problem where when all of us are on the blue line, we gravitate towards these really self-serving and satisfying stories about the deficits and pathologies of those people who don't vote or behave the way we want them to. And there's not too many people in these institutions who are able to take a minute and go, I don't think that's true. Because we're all in the blue, and we all almost all of us want it to be true, actually, the Republicans are bad people who are motivated by bad impulses and so on.
And I think part of it is also that the communities have never been tighter than they have been before. Like, because of social media, everybody is closer together, or at least everybody can be touched and interacted with in the same way that you and Matt Iglesias made sure that that reporter knew that that chart was wrong. If that reporter had posted something that said, hey, by the way, women are flocking away from the Democratic ticket, so maybe the entire theory of the case for Kamala Harris winning the presidency is deeply flawed and heading off a cliff, then that person's probably closer to getting a DM from somebody involved in Democratic Party politics that are saying, what are you doing? You're spreading this idea that is dangerous and it's going to hurt us. And that's really the biggest thing that I think is frustrating. And I do think that the dam or the fever is breaking, whichever metaphor you want to go with. But like, is that the money right now is increasingly toward people who are valuing whether or not these things are correct. And it's not just a freemium model where it's advertising based. And so therefore you can get away with a lot more. At the end of the day, if NBC totally screws up their election coverage, and many would argue that they have repeatedly over and over again, I don't think anybody would grade them and say, great job, that was amazing. Everybody had a clearer idea of what was going to happen. But they're going to be there tomorrow. Now, maybe less than they would before, and that gets into questions of economics and everything. But I do wonder if, for a few different reasons, like a lot of these in-groups now are not going to have the exact same pull that they might have going forward. And that's a lot of the premise of the book, is that while a lot of these institutions were brought up in and created as a way to be competent technocratic institutions like journalism, I was drilled when I went to J school the rules of journalism. This is what you do. This is how you do it. There might be little different versions depending on where you go, that they have certain different rules on things. But by and large, this is the core OS of what it means to be a journalist. But regardless of how well-intentioned, at the end of the day, when a bunch of people get together that are protecting their own status in the hierarchy and know, well, but we know who the good people are, we know who the bad people are, you're going to wind up fudging that kind of stuff. And so I do wonder whether or not in a more diffuse world where, you know, you're able to write a book with the press and then also have a Substack, and you're still going to be able to sell your work to various other different outlets that want to buy it, but you are not necessarily, you know, in a newsroom working with stuff. I've been out in the wilderness making podcasts for over 10 years. And as that becomes more of the norm, or at least this is no longer an outcast mindset, this is now more of the mean. I wonder if it results in better product.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ways, you know, one of the deep problems in a lot of these institutions in higher ed and journalism and so on, is they have a lot of these systems that are premised on the fact that each of us have kind of finite and incomplete knowledge, and that we all have biases and so on. And so the idea is, by bringing together these different stakeholders with different beliefs and experiences and whatever to check each other, that we can produce a more reliable, coherent, comprehensive understanding of reality, produce something that approaches objective and comprehensive truth and so on. Okay, the thing about it though is these systems only work as intended if you actually do have substantive diversity in terms of values and politics and morals and interests. If in a world where you have these increasingly homogenous and idiosyncratic slices of society that dominate these institutions, then instead of helping us correct for our biases, they can often exacerbate them and reinforce them instead. It can be actually more difficult for people who notice a problem to be able to speak up. It can be more difficult for, you can get misinformation cascades and things like this. It becomes easier for those kinds of things to happen instead of harder. And so this is one of the big problems within a lot of the institutions, is that they are comprised of this narrow and strange slice of society, and they're not particularly, and in some ways they're growing more narrow. And so there are kind of a couple ways that this problem could be adjudicated. One of them would be like trying to help broader swath of society participate. So have more working class people, more Republicans, more whatever, folded into these institutions. That's tough for a bunch of reasons, like logistically tough.
Yeah.
And it's also a long process, longish
Yeah,
process.
I was joked that, I came out of Syracuse University. There was a pipeline for me to go to a bunch of different outlets, especially in the world of newspapers. As far as I know, there was no Liberty University to the New York Times pipeline. Like that takes generations. It takes many, many years for people to do things very, very deliberately for that kind of stuff to be built up.
Absolutely. And so the other model is competition. And so this is where I think, as you said, the creation of and growing popularity of things like Substacks and podcasts and other things like this, where you have people who are able to circumvent some of the traditional gatekeeping structures and still be able to maintain solid income, solid audiences, and can sometimes serve as a corrective or counterbalance or a check to some of the narratives of mainstream institutions. I think that's on balance helpful. Of course, anytime you create that kind of an alternative ecosystem, there's a lot of potential for people who are like, hacks or grifters or whatever, ideologues and zealots.
Sure.
Like, the gatekeepers, they did actually work sometimes to keep out those kind of people. But they also, unfortunately, again, the big problem, though, is that those aren't the only people the gatekeepers kept out. They also increasingly just keep out anyone who diverges from them on moral and political issues, or anyone who even disagrees with them sometimes about empirical facts, even when they themselves are wrong, and so on and so forth. And so this is the... and so I think gatekeeping can serve a function. But I also think that when the gatekeepers are awry and when these institutions become this kind of narrow and parochial, one of the main levers that you can have to improve things in the here and now, not over generations, although the generational project is also important. People should work on diversifying these institutions. But,
yes.
But here and now, the best solution, I think, is competition. And this is one of the things that I show in the book, is a thing that you see actually after each of these periods of awakening. What tends to happen is, because of the ways that knowledge economy professionals conduct themselves, because we often behave in these untrustworthy ways and these ways that model contempt for people who are not like us and so on, this often does create an opportunity for political entrepreneurs, usually associated with the right, to campaign against us, to bring us under control and so on. So you have people like DeSantis saying, universities are indoctrinating the kids instead of teaching them useful knowledge and skills. Let's get them back on the right path and so on. You see this after all the awakenings, but then you also see, after all the awakenings usually, the creation of alternative knowledge economy infrastructures. And the reason why you see these getting created usually is because the ways that we conduct ourselves seem to convince a lot of the public that we actually can't be trusted, and this creates an opportunity for other people to try to step in. Yeah.
All right, let's get back to the election for a second. One of the arguments that even kind of had made its way into the mainstream was that while we began to see pretty undeniable trend lines in public polling, that Black Americans were supporting Trump more, Hispanic Americans were supporting Trump more. It was not a shock that he improved on those. The argument had been, sure, but those largely knowledge economy, white professionals in the suburban areas are continuing to vote more demonstrably for the Democrats. All those things happened. What feels like a truth that has kind of come out of this is that one of these groups has a higher ceiling, and it's not the knowledge economy professionals in the suburbs. There are a lot more people who did not go to college than did go to college, and if you are winning on that divide, then the party that does better there is just going to be more successful in the long run. Has that borne out by the data that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, so the calculation that some of the Democrats seem to have been engaged in for a while now is that, the knowledge economy professionals are a valuable constituency for a few reasons. They donate at higher levels, and they have more discretionary income to donate.
Mm-hmm.
They participate in political stuff more. So they're more likely to vote. They vote at higher levels. They vote more consistently, not just in presidential years, but also in special elections and midterms and so on. They have flexible jobs that allow them to do that. They also take part in canvassing and things like that. They're more likely to share things on social media and advocate for, and so on and so forth. And so we're more politically engaged. We have more money and resources. We vote at higher levels. And so it seemed to them that if they were trading off even multiple normie voters in exchange for one of us, that was a good deal. The problem, though, that they face basically two problems. One is that maybe that's true up to a point, but eventually the ratios of getting one more person to like say 7 or 8 or 10 of these other people, it actually starts to not be a good math. But then the second big problem that the Democrats face, especially as it relates to winning the Electoral College and things like that, is that these knowledge economy professionals tend to be consolidated in a small number of states and communities that Democrats already control well. And a lot of the rest of America, including a number of swing states, actually don't have a lot of knowledge economy professionals, a lot of knowledge economy hubs. They're places that knowledge economy professionals are actually fleeing. And so the Electoral College map, the Electoral College math actually looks kind of bleak and increasingly bleak. And in fact, after 2030, if you look at which states have been gaining people and which states have been losing people, after 2030, when we do the census again, and they reallocate electoral college votes and congressional representation and things like this on the basis of the shifting population. The Electoral College math is actually going to get a lot harder for Democrats than it currently is if nothing else changes about their coalitional strategy. And so I think ultimately their current posture isn't workable. I think there's some growing awareness within at least some factions of the Democratic Party that their current coalitional strategy is not workable. The main thing that it seems a lot of Democrats are trying to figure out then is what would work better and how can they avoid throwing groups and causes and whatever that they care about under the bus and so on.
The groups.
Yeah. And I'll say another big error that they had is one of the reasons why they assumed that they could have this coalition where you have the knowledge economy professionals, but also even if you lose the white working class, they thought they would continue to have blacks and Hispanics. And so they would have minorities plus professionals. That's kind of the dream coalition. And they assumed that they could maintain that kind of coalition because they thought that their own positions on things like race were appealing to non-whites, or that their own positions on things like religion were appealing to religious minorities and so on. In fact, they're not. They're off-putting and alienating. A lot of, if you look at on issues related to, for instance, crime and criminal justice, Black Americans or some of Democrat Party strikes and progressive groups and so on advocate for really aggressive positions in the name of Black Americans. But if you look at Black public opinion, most Black Americans not only don't support those positions, but they actually have deep concerns about public safety and public order, and they actually like some of the tough on crime rhetoric and so on. Similarly, on immigration, there are a lot of Democrats who strike really progressive, libertarian-ish stances on immigration, thinking that this appeals to Hispanics, but it turns out a lot of Hispanic and Latino people actually are some of the people who are most concerned about undocumented immigrants and stemming the tide of immigration and making sure people come over the quote right way and so on and so forth. And so some of the shifts that we've seen among Hispanics and Latinos towards the GOP have actually been motivated by Trump's posture on immigration. And this is something that, again, we have a hard time processing because we just assume that our positions are the positions that the minorities do have or should have, and so forth. And so it's been, a lot of Democrats thought that by striking these positions on cultural issues, that would not only increase their appeal with knowledge economy professionals, but would also increase their appeal with non-white voters and so on. But in fact, it turns out that's just not the case. A lot of their positions on cultural issues might appeal to people like us, but they actually alienate Black people, Hispanic people, and so on, even for issues that are marked for those groups.
Yes.
And when you look at other issues across groups. Like a lot of knowledge economy professionals also have this false understanding that all of the causes we believe in and care about, they just all travel easily together and there are no trade-offs. And so you have a lot of progressives that say things like trans rights is a Black Lives Matter issue, or access to contraception is a gay rights issue, which if there was one issue that was disproportionately relevant for heterosexuals, it would be that. But whatever. But in truth, if you look at, for instance, which subsets of the Democratic coalition are most skeptical about things like gender affirming care for minors or teaching about sexuality in K-12 schools, and so on and so forth. It's Black people, Hispanic people, lower income people, religious minorities like Muslims, and so on. If you look at things like the Muslim ban, Trump's Muslim ban in 2016 and so on, which sectors of the Democratic coalition were most supportive of that? Well, that would also be Black and Hispanic people who are more likely to be religious and who view, in many cases, Islam as a false and dangerous religion. And if there's some guy who's saying, I'm going to prevent more of those people from coming into the country, they don't think that's a bad thing. And so a lot of us think, well, if Trump says something bad about one minority group, then of course all the other minority groups are going to hate that and react negatively to it. But in truth, not only do we misperceive what, say, Black Americans want or Hispanic Americans want for issues coded for their own groups, but in fact, a lot of times, messaging that we view as racist or transphobic or homophobic or so on, we just assume all the minorities will react negatively to it. In fact, other minorities are some of the people who are most supportive of a lot of these policies and narratives from the GOP. And this is something that we just have a hard time processing because we don't want to blame minorities for anything we think of as bad. So if they're supporting policies that we think of as homophobic or transphobic or whatever, we don't feel comfortable talking about how Black people and Hispanics are some of the people who are most, who shifts among those people are most responsible for empowering these people we think of as bad, and so on. It's really tough for us to do that because we think, again, all of these people are good, noble, and pure, as opposed to the cisgender, heterosexual, privileged white people, and that all of these good things go together and there aren't any trade-offs. And like, this is the kind of story that we like to tell and think about, and it's just not true is the problem.
I think that's part of where something shattered after this election, and I think part of it is that this idea of infinite intersectionality, that everything is tied together, and all you have to do is say it, and combine that with the concept of this like great taste, less filling activism world of like, oh, well, I can just put on this flag in my bio, or I can yell at my friends on Facebook, and that means that I'm doing my part. I am quote unquote doing the work. And at the end of the day, you find yourself, retweeting Liz Cheney talking about how we need to, bring a Democratic majority to the House, Senate, and White House. And it's like, wait, how does this make sense? Like, what? I mean, that was the craziest moment of the election. Is I'm watching this and I'm like, the Cheneys, of all people, the Cheneys. We had Claire Mignon, who writes for a French paper, Le Poix, that has been on the show, but she was in some of the Muslim majority cities in Michigan. And she was talking to them about, like, and it's largely Lebanese Americans, about like, oh, well, the Muslim ban, like what you're going to support. It was like in Hamtramck where the mayor had endorsed Trump. And you're like, oh, so you're going to support Trump, but he had the Muslim ban. And they're like, well, that went in, and then there were lawsuits. Like, they knew there was like a framework that they knew the holes. They knew what did and didn't exist. And then you talked about the Cheneys, and they were like, never with the Cheneys, because the scars of the like FBI coming into, libraries was a lot more scarring than the Muslim ban. But if you thought, I mean, the mainstream liberal thought at that moment was like, no, this is far more scary. The Muslim ban is far more scary. Donald Trump is far scarier than anything that could happen in the past. And that's just this element of like self-erasure of history, or really even, and this gets to what a lot of your book is about, listening to the people that you are supporting. Like that's that kind of hopefully that there is something that has kind of shattered there, where at the very least for everybody involved, up to and including the communities, to liberal America, to conservative America, whatever, the knowledge workers, as we are all talking together in our airy rarefied space, like, it's just better to, do the actual work, listen to people, report what they actually have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that was, there are a whole bunch of moments that were really wild for me this cycle. One of them was in the Democratic National Convention, where right after Bernie Sanders took the stage and talked about oligarchy and the millionaires and the billionaires and some, did his usual shtick, he was followed by J.B. Pritzker, the richest person currently serving in Congress, who was talking about how he's a real billionaire and how, and
governor of Illinois, Pritzker.
Yeah, people were cheering him and celebrating him, bragging about how rich he is, like just seconds after Bernie Sanders left the stage, and or even the decision to send Bill Clinton to Michigan, NAFTA king Bill Clinton, to a place that was hollowed out by a lot of these changes to the global economic order that a lot of people blame Clinton and his policies for. To send that guy to Michigan under any circumstances is political malpractice. But then to have his core message, to have him primarily address Muslim and Arab voters and have his core message be basically the Harris-Waltz administration is going to take basically the same position as Biden-Harris on these issues. Netanyahu can do whatever he wants, and you should just get used to it and accept it. If that was, he literally went to Michigan and delivered that message, which is insane. How he thought that was going to help, or I don't understand. I just don't understand. But for a lot of Arab and Muslim voters, right, this was the trade-off. Even on the issue of Gaza, a lot of people have had a hard time understanding how Muslims could vote for Trump, because they assume that, and Arabs and people concerned about Gaza and so on. But the calculation that I've been hearing a lot from people is like, look, if you have a choice, if the choice you have is that one guy is definitely going to cut off your arm, or you can go with option two, where the guy might cut off your arm, might give you $1 million, or might just actually kill you. A lot lot of people would choose option two. They would choose option
roll
two.
The dice.
To roll the dice.
Maybe you'll forget about it.
Yeah, rather than to take a guaranteed loss. And so what Biden and Harris have basically been saying consistently, their policy over the last year leading up to the election, and 100% of their narratives and stuff throughout the election cycle, was that they weren't going to change much of anything about U.S. policy.
Yeah.
They were going to write Netanyahu a blank check. Maybe they'd occasionally wring their hands about how sad it is or something like that, but they weren't going to do anything to check Netanyahu. They just weren't. And that was their position for the last year. That was their position on the campaign trail. They sent Bill Clinton to Michigan to deliver precisely that narrative. And so for a lot of these voters, if they have to choose between just guaranteed blank check for Netanyahu or someone who might do that, but also might, I mean, Trump actually went to Michigan and met with a lot of these Muslim leaders, whereas Harris refused. They invited Harris. They wanted to meet with her. They wanted to meet with Biden. They were too busy. They didn't have time for them. But Trump did. Trump found time. He made time. He talked to them. They felt like he heard their concerns and took them seriously. They couldn't get that kind of response from Democrats. So how should it be surprising to anyone? But they, and so, if you have to choose, if those are your choices, guy who's definitely going to cut off your arm or rolling the dice between that and possibly a good or a bad option, like that's a bad choice. You would prefer to not have those be your two choices. But if those are the two choices you have, it's actually an easy choice for a lot of people, despite being a bad choice. They'll choose to roll the dice. Yeah. And that's what a lot of voters chose to do.
And that was something that I, again, going off Claire's reporting, it was almost a larger insult with Kamala than it was with Biden, because a lot of those communities, look, Joe Biden's been telling gold to my ear stories for 50 years. Like this is a dude that people know, even in those communities, they know he was a Zionist. They knew where his perspective was. So at the very least, they can be mad, they can be angry, but they weren't surprised. They didn't really think that anything was going to be different. Kamala Harris had come out as kind of the professional hand wringer while everything was going on, and then has that first moment, which speaking of political malpractice, she's doing her first big rally in the Detroit area, and shocker, there are protesters there protesting Gaza, and it's like, to not have anything other than shut up, I'm talking. Yeah. There's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you possibly like? What is even going on? Anyway, that was looked at as more of a betrayal. That it was like, okay, so you actually have leeway. Like you're not beholden to 50 years of everything that you've said before. You're kind of fresh in this situation, and you're just going to pretend.
This is the choice you're making. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then the last thing I'll say about this maybe is that another thing that's relevant for understanding these trend lines among Muslim voters, because as I showed in the 2020 race, actually, if you look between 2016 and 2020, there was already a massive shift underway among Muslim voters towards the GOP. This wasn't something that started after October 7th. Yeah. It's actually been a consistent movement for a number of years now. And the reason for this is because Democratic, Muslims have, before 9/11, Muslims were actually a swing constituency. Yeah. After 9/11, they became a reliable Democratic voting bloc.
Because of the Cheneys! Because of the Cheneys!
Yeah, not because they agreed with Democrats on cultural issues and so on, but because they viewed them as better out. If one party is patriot acting you and putting you in internment camps and so on, and the other party is like, I think that's bad, then that's an easy choice. Even if you don't disagree with them, even if you don't agree with them on a lot of cultural stuff. But what happened over the last, since Trump was elected, from 2016 through 2020, is that a lot of these foreign policy and national security issues actually became more muted. ISIS was basically defeated. The war on terror, they were trying to draw down troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so if the issue that you're voting for the Democrats for becomes less salient, and the things that you disagree with the Democrats about, these cultural issues and stuff, become more salient because of the Great Awakening, then that's part of why you started seeing the shift already. And then in what you saw after October 7th in the United States is that if both the Democrats and the Republicans are both saying, well, Netanyahu is going to get a blank check, it's just one party will say that's sad and the other party will say that's great. But they're both going to write the check anyway. If there's not actually a difference, the substantive, meaningful difference between the Democrats and the Republicans on this issue, which is the main issue that you've been voting on, the main issue that the only reason you voted for Democrats to begin with is that there seemed to be a difference on these issues between them and the Republicans. If the Democrats are just erasing that difference themselves, then all that's left are things like these cultural issues, which you disagree with the Democrats for. So it will accelerate the losses that they've already been seeing with these voters. And so, I didn't think that those trend lines were surprising, but a lot of folks did because they have this kind of strange understanding about why people vote for Democrats in the first place.
That was, the moment that the Hamtramck mayor endorsed Trump. A friend of mine sent me the Facebook post that he made. And of course, all of the comments, because he's in a majority Muslim district, they were all in Arabic. So you hit translate for the folks who don't speak the language. It's a Breitbart comment section. It was like extraordinarily conservative of just awesome. That's amazing. You're great. This is fantastic. Blah, blah, blah. Like it's, I don't know. I hope, and this is why I've loved bringing you on the show back then. I love having you on now. It's just that it's like, it is just refreshing to finally just like look at some of these things in the way that they actually are, divorced of kind of the political narrative, because that is the one thing that I do hope does separate, even though it makes me a little bit less special in terms of the content that I create, is like just something that is like, hey, let's understand this is who's voting here. Like, if we're going to actually try to predict who's going to win, let's understand the lay of the land. And it's something that you've always been committed to, and you continue to write about on your Substack. So plug that.
So my Substack is called Symbolic Capitalism. And it like, the point of it is it extends some of the arguments and themes from the first book that's coming out and for the second book that's currently in development. That second book is going to be making the case that the case that I mentioned about how the diploma divide, the urban-rural divide, all of these things, they're actually proxies for this deeper schism in American society. And a lot of issues that we often think of as separate, like the, quote, crisis of expertise or growing conflict around identity politics or the rise of, quote, populist leaders like Trump and so on. I argue that these are all fronts in this deeper struggle between knowledge economy professionals and people who increasingly feel like they don't have a voice or a stake in our institutions and in our social order. And so that'll be the argument of the second book. The second book will be all about that. And if you subscribe to my Substack, I'll be piloting a lot of thoughts and ideas about these topics over the next year or so as I'm writing the book.
Well, you guys don't need me to say it one more time, but I will anyway. Go subscribe to that. It is very, very rarely a time in which Musa takes the time to write stuff down that it's not worth reading. So go ahead and check that out. Musa, thank you so much. And again, congratulations. Hell of a year for you.
Thanks so much for having me. And congratulations on your blessed year as well.
Indeed. Thank you. And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics. It's hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. If you want to send me an email, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Justin R. Young on TikTok, Instagram, and X. If you want to follow us on YouTube, we love the YouTube audience. Little Santa Gerbs might have accidentally published one of the bonus episodes for the YouTube audience, but I left it out there because you want to know what? If it hits the table, it's yours. Politics is where you find us on YouTube. You can support us with a one-time donation, paypal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3 Cash. Send me anything you like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. But again, you can only get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. Either $3 a week if you're paying monthly, or $99 if you want to get it for the entire year. That's 150 episodes of PX3 for under $100. You can't beat it with a stick. But our founding tier is the way that you get your name read at the end of the podcast, like these fine folks: L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes, oh yeah, it's Adam, Neil, AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, a dog named Trekkers, my gracious and beautiful mother, Gloria, Jerry, Trekker, John, Berkeley, Steven, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show? Then come on over to that founding tier. Kids, we got a little special treat for you guys. Many of you remember there used to be a young voice that would say politics. That is, come on, kids. Where's Eddie? Where's Big Ed? Big Ed, you sit on Santa Gerbs' other knee here. Come on, here we go. There we go. So, what would we like to wish? There's people around the world that are watching you right now. We want to wish them what?
Happy Christmas and Hanukkah.
Right? Happy Christmas and Hanukkah. Well, that's very British. The British say Happy Christmas. So why don't you say Merry Christmas, Eddie?
Merry Christmas!
From all of us at PX3 to you, wherever you are, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and we will see you before the end of the year for our year-end episode with Kevin Ryan.
Bye.
A reminder that some shows talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh! 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.